Yokoso wa shitare. Welcome back. We do have a very interesting story for you today, all about divination and a conspiracy for murder. I am, however, going to say that I have added a little bit of personal flourishes. I've rearranged some things to make them a little bit more entertaining, shall we say. And hopefully I did a good job, but let's waste no more time and get right into it. Once upon a time, imawa mukashi, there was a man whose name does not actually show up in the original text. This is a very old text that we're dealing with, and sometimes the writing is damaged or just missing or illegible. However, according to another source that I use, doing some cross-referencing with some other writings of the time, it's very likely that the man's name was actually Tomo no Yotsugi. And there may actually be a fairly understandable reason why his name does not appear here. It's because he was a tax collector. Specifically, he worked for the Gokuzouin, which was a department of the government in the capital at Heian-kyo in modern Kyoto that dealt with taxes. But one day, this man, Tomo no Yotsugi, I'm just going to call him Yotsugi from now on, was sent out to the eastern provinces to do his job and collect taxes. Now mind you, this was not something that was going to be done in a week or even a month. This was a project that was going to take a very, very long time. And so, after spending however long he was in the eastern provinces doing his duty, eventually Yotsugi ended up coming back to the capital. But on his way back, he stopped in the province of Omi, specifically in a village called Seta. And if you are wondering why the kanji for Omi is spelled thus, I don't know, it's ancient Japanese, your guess is as good as mine. But Yotsugi had decided that he was going to spend his night at the stables in Seta, which it wasn't just stables. There was some lodging there for people, but that was the obvious place to stay if you had horses, which being a nobleman and being on official government business, it's very likely that that's exactly what he had. And probably not just one horse. He had lots and lots of taxes to return to the capital. He had a whole retinue, most likely, to help cart everything that he had gained from the eastern provinces. But he was staying at these stables, and he ran into a very pleasant chap, a good man. And these two men ended up talking together. And Yotsugi came to learn that this man's name was Yuge no Koreo. And so, as they're sitting there chatting, probably next to a roaring fire with a little bit of drink and some food and some capital company, Yotsugi asks Koreo, "So, what brings you to these parts, and specifically what brings you to this stable? How does it come about that we are now hotel mates, as it were?" And Koreo, being a genial chap, answered very kindly, "Well, sir, I am actually an onmyoji. Specifically, I am a tenmon hakase, and I have been invited by the governor of this province to help do some divination and some rites for a festival that's going on nearby." Now, for those of you who are wondering what an onmyoji is, in the previous video we did mention an onmyoji is kind of like an ancient Japanese wizard. They were practiced in arcane arts. They could perform spells, do rites for festivals. But specifically, this man was not just an onmyoji. He was a tenmon hakase. Hakase means something akin to a professor, a doctor, somebody who is very knowledgeable and well studied in a field. And specifically, the field of tenmon, ten meaning heaven and mon meaning writing, meant that he was an astrologer. He was skilled in the art of reading the stars, and from that determining what the future would hold, what's happening in the world, all sorts of esoteric, magical things. And so Koreo explains, well, you know, I'm here as a tenmon hakase at the behest of the governor, and that's why I'm here. But then he returns the question. Koreo looks to Yotsugi and asks him, "So, where are you from, and what brings you here?" And Yotsugi politely responds, "Well, I'm a member of the Gokuzouin, and I was just in the eastern provinces collecting taxes for the government. I'm actually on my way back home right now, and we figured it would be good to stop here and rest, but tomorrow we're planning on packing up and making our way back. We should be home in maybe a couple of days or so if all things go according to plan." And so, the two men chatted very genially, very friendly, but they had a good time getting to know each other and swapping stories about what was going on in the world, their various professions, or whatever things men typically like to talk about when they get together. But the night wore on, and both decided that it was time to turn in. So they each went their separate ways and fell asleep. However, that night, Yotsugi had a terrible, horrible dream. Absolutely nightmarish. Well, I mean, because it's a nightmare. Unfortunately, the text doesn't tell us exactly what happened in the dream, just that he had a bad dream. And when he woke up the next day, he was very concerned. But luckily for him, he happened to be hotel mates with a practiced and very skilled and very knowledgeable Onmyoji who knew exactly how to interpret dreams, as that was one of the duties that a Tenmon Hakase had. So Yotsugi came to Koreo and asked him, "Hey, I had the worst dream last night and I'm terrified that it actually means something more than just being a bad dream. And it's very fortunate that you happen to be here with me. And I ask you, can you please interpret this dream and tell me if there's anything I need to be worried about?" And so Yotsugi begins explaining the dream to Koreo. And the whole time he's explaining it, Koreo's brow just gets more and more furrowed and his expression becomes graver and graver. And after learning the whole of the dream and doing whatever else he needed to do his divination, Koreo simply looked at Yotsugi and told him, "Do not go home today or tomorrow. Do not make your way back home as soon as you can. Stay here for a few extra days, because there is somebody at your home who is lying in wait to take your life. There are dark forces amassed against you, and for your own good, I recommend that you stay here a while longer." Now, this was a problem for Yotsugi for a couple of reasons. Number one, nobody liked being out in the provinces. Anyone who was anyone lived in the capital at the time. That was the center of culture. It was the center of wealth. It was the place where, at least in their eyes, anybody who was anybody gathered and spent their time. That was where everybody wanted to be. Though those everybody were generally the very wealthy, very disconnected elites, but you know, that was the impression everybody had. But more important than that, Yotsugi had been away for a long time, a very long time. He wanted to be back home. He wanted to go home, to see his wife again, to spend time in his own house, to sleep in his own, well, he didn't really have a bed, but sleep in his own house. And more important than even that, Yotsugi was a tax collector, and he had taxes from the eastern provinces with him. And every day he spent not getting them to the capital was another day where something could get stolen, where they could get attacked, where he could lose them, and that would be a terrible, terrible travesty. Plus, where is he going to put everything? Even if nobody steals it, it's still a pain in the butt to have it just there. And everyone was expecting him to arrive on that day. It's very likely that he had been writing letters to the capital explaining that he was on his way back and people, his bosses, were expecting him. And so Yotsugi explains this. He cannot afford to stay any longer in this place and he needs to get back home as fast as possible for all of these various reasons. And so Yotsugi begs Koreo, "Please, sir, if there's any way that I can get back home as soon as possible and still avoid whatever it is that's waiting for me, can you please tell me how to do just that? Can you please tell me what I need to do to avoid my impending death?" And Koreo just simply sighed. "Well, I suppose there is one thing we can do, and I will tell you exactly what you need to do, but you need to be very, very attentive to what I say and do not stray from it at all, exactly as I say." And thus Koreo told Yotsugi what to do exactly, which will come a little bit later, because Yotsugi did follow Koreo's words to a T, and you will see what happens. So that day, Yotsugi leaves as soon as possible, and he makes his way back home, and he arrives as scheduled. Now, when he arrives at home, obviously the whole house is in a bit of an uproar. The Lord has returned, and he's brought his goods. We need to get everything ready for him. We need to prepare for him. We need to take all of the things that he brought with him and store them somewhere safely. There was just a whole bunch of things that needed to be done ASAP. So the whole house was busy, running around here and there. Everybody was caught up in something or another. And Yotsugi, as soon as he arrives, he stores away the goods that he brought from the eastern provinces. He takes one bow and one arrow, and he goes inside with several retainers by his side, which is very strange because it's his house. Normally he would just go in alone, but he's not alone. And he's bringing a bow and an arrow inside? What the heck? Why would he do that? But as he was wandering around his house, checking to make sure that everything was good and it had been as he had left it, he eventually wandered over to the northeastern corner of his house. And as he's walking, he passes by an open door that led into one small room. And he looked into this room and saw a woven mat. I believe it's made out of rushes, but it was a roughly woven mat of some kind that was hanging in this room. And Yotsugi suddenly stops, and he stares at this mat for a while. And all his retainers and all the servants of the house see this, and they stop too, and they look at him and think, is everything okay, sir? Are you okay? And all of a sudden, Yotsugi pulls the bow and arrow out. He knocks the arrow in, and he pulls the string back, and he points the arrow directly at this mat that's just hanging in this room that nobody is in. And he shouts, "You, I know you've been waiting for me. You've been waiting for me to return home so that you can take my life. Get out here now, and if you don't, I will shoot you and kill you here and now. Show yourself." And of course, everybody around him is just stunned, like, whoa, is he crazy? Was he hanging out with those barbarians in the eastern provinces for too long? Did they feed him something and now he's crazy? What's going on? But then there was some rustling behind the mat, and out popped a single Buddhist priest. And Yotsugi then commanded his men to grab this guy and bring him forward, which they did. And Yotsugi begins questioning him. Who are you? Why did you do this? What's going on? What is your aim here? At first, the priest said nothing, but Yotsugi had ways of making men talk. They weren't very secret ways, and I don't think I need to explain what kind of ways were available to men who lived in a time before human rights. But sure enough, after putting this priest under some persuasion, he eventually cracked and explained the whole situation. He told Yotsugi that he had actually been put up to this task by the lady of this estate. The lady of this estate being Yotsugi's own wife. Because it turns out that while Yotsugi was away in the eastern provinces, this priest had been coming in secret to spend some quality time with the lady of the house. And upon hearing that Yotsugi was going to return on this day, again likely from the letters that he had been sending the whole time, she came to this priest, her lover, and she told him that he should wait in ambush for Yotsugi to come back and to kill him. Now, why did she do this? I'm not entirely sure. There could be many reasons. Maybe she really loved this Buddhist priest and was just tired of her husband. Maybe she's worried that because he went out into the eastern provinces where the barbarians lived, that he would come back uncouth and shame her in some way or fashion. Maybe she just didn't like being married to a tax collector. Honestly, we have no idea. All we know is that it was his wife that put this Buddhist priest up to this attempted assassination. Now, of course, this was all news to Yotsugi. And he was obviously very stunned on the one hand, but on the other hand, he was so grateful that he happened to be sharing the same hotel with a man who was able to accurately explain the danger that was lurking at home. And that he was able to not only catch this priest, but also that he was able to figure out that his wife was cheating on him. And so, after praising Koreo's abilities to himself, Yotsugi had this priest turned over to the authorities. And as for his wife, he just stopped coming around to visit her again, which basically meant that he divorced her. Because in ancient Japan, marriage was very different than it is for us now. The way it normally worked is when a man married a woman, he would basically just go over to her house and visit her, wherein they would spend all of their quality time together. But when they were done with their romantic escapades, the man would leave, go to court, or go to his job, or go back to his own house, and man and wife would stay fairly separated for a long amount of the time. And so if a man wanted to divorce a woman, basically all he would do is he would just stop visiting her, which was actually a very shameful thing. As a woman, if a man doesn't want to come around to see you, let alone your husband, that's rather scandalous in a society where face and reputation was the single most important thing to anybody, and you could be ruthlessly attacked and demolished if you showed any signs of reputational damage. And so the story ends with one little word of advice. It basically says that even a wife of many, many years is somebody for whom you must not let down your guard. And even among the delicate and tender hearts of women, there are those who are as ruthless and vicious as this woman herself. And thus is it said that the magician Koreo's skill was marvelous and without peer in all the realm. And that's the whole of the story. I've got nothing in the way of commentary, so I will simply thank you for your view / your listen. Ito katejike no koso haberi kere. And if you did enjoy this story, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to be in the loop on future stories that are coming out, because trust me, I've got a lot of them. And you know, if you want to brag to all your weeb friends and show them how much more educated you are in classical Japanese literature than them now, please feel free to do so. But, you know, they might want to hear about these stories too, so please share it with them. Or your history buff friends, or your literature buff friends, or your friends who like watching amateur idiots attempt to tell you stories from 1,000 years ago in a language that nobody speaks anymore, because I guess he's just crazy. So, with that all being said, I want to thank you one more time, and we will see you in the next one. Saraba. Saraba. That's like sayonara, but it's the older version of sayonara. I don't even know if they really said that, but anyway, I'm just going to end it now.